Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us for today's NFT launch on the XVERSO platform. I'm joined by fantastic artist Halim Flowers, who will be talking with us today about his career, his life, his practice as an artist. I just want to mention for everyone that's joining us that this auction will actually last for 24 hours. So once we're done with today's conversation, you'll still have 24 hours to bid on the 10 NFTs that are being launched today. Also, each NFT, while it's a visual image, is accompanied by an audio file that is a description of the work that's presented by Halim himself. So, without further ado, Halim, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Dexter. I'm blessed. I'm present, and I'm here.
Well, listen, man. I've been wanting to talk with you for a long time about your work as an artist, about your life, about your career. So I think this is a perfect opportunity for us to get into all of that. So maybe you can just take us back to the beginning of your life as an artist, and you can frame that in any way that you like. But I just want to give us a starting point, and maybe we'll start with art. And I'm also interested in talking about poetry. I'm also interested in talking about literature and writing. There's a lot. There's a lot to cover, but let's start with art.
When you say art, I'm definitely thinking that you mean in visual art. So for
Visual art,
me,
yeah.
my career as a visual artist began during the quarantine in March 2020. All of my speaking engagements, my performance art was canceled, which was the majority source of my revenue at that time because I had only been home from prison for 1 year. And me listening to Jay-Z rap about Basquiat so much and having the opportunity to come home from prison and to go to the museums and the galleries and see Basquiat work along with other incredible artists, it inspired me to start to express myself visually because I wasn't seeing a lot of work in museums and galleries that really like spoke to me and spoke to my experience. And I felt like it had to be a demand for some body of visual work that spoke to my experience as a child growing up, during the war and drugs and going through what I went through in the 80s and 90s and, having the opportunity not just to listen to hip hop music that spoke to my experience, but to see my experience in museums and galleries. So that really was my impetus to really start creating. I really wanted to create what I liked. And I felt like Basquiat left off in the 80s and nobody like what I was saying really like picked up where he left off at.
Oh, that's fascinating. I mean, would you say then it's only been about 3 years that you've been focused on the visual art aspect of your career, and how did you get so much success in such a short period of time?
Yeah, it's not even 3 years yet. So like March 2020, I just was looking at my original painting that I did. Where I just started out just like trying to scribble poetry and prose on a canvas. And so for me it's like not even 3 years, 2 years. And success for me is just having the ability to be able to express oneself creatively without any commercial or celebratory concern. But I've had commercial viability, and I've gained some awareness of in social media and the market. But I don't want to confuse other collectors or emerging artists that success is anonymous with making money. Because what end up happening is I've run into a lot of artists who had the opportunity to go to MFA programs, and they tell me that they envy me because they like you have the freedom to paint what you feel. And when I try to do that, I can hear my instructor in my head stopping me from doing what my spirit and my intuitive genius is calling for me to do. And so for me, success is being able to show up in my authentic self and to be able to express myself in my authentic self and not having to create work for commercial viability and still be commercially successful. So that's like what's been successful to me. It's not a short period of time because a lot of the economic and philosophical things that I paint about is decades of research.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I forget what the exact story is, but they talk about, like how bamboo grows. It's under the ground for a decade, and then it grows 20 feet in a day.
Yeah.
You know.
I like to liken myself to the lotus. People look at the emerging out of the water, but they don't see the beauty in the mud, that's under the
Yeah,
water.
yeah. And speaking of that process and your experiences, I mean, look, it goes without saying that you've gone through a lot in your life, and a lot of that has informed the work that you do and the person that you are today. I mean, to the extent that you want to, discuss it for those who are hearing about you for the first time, who may not be familiar with your story, your life, your journey, which I imagine is many people. Maybe we can kind of explain to folks a little bit about, the so I would call it traumatic experience that you've gone through in your life that has sort of molded you into the person that's here with us today.
Yeah, for me, I think the first traumatic experience was being a nerd and a geek, right? As a kid, being academically inclined, loving mathematics and different type of sciences, and being raised in the community at that time that didn't celebrate that. And what was celebrated in my community in the 80s were the drug dealers, the crack dealers, and all of the things that they could consume, like the sweatsuits and the sneakers and the jackets and the Turbo Zs, and and me coming back to the hood, like, hey, I score high on my pre-SATs when I'm 11, and I'm gonna be able to take classes at Howard University. They like, oh, all right, all right, all right. Like, so, and not knowing that that was traumatic at that time, because not having that deep commitment of love for myself at that time, I discarded what came natural to me, which was academics and artistic creativity, and became this drug dealing character called Face, right? And started doing all these things due to poverty and due to a lack of self-love. So I didn't have a trust fund, right, to be able to purchase these things. And I didn't have mentors who were venture capitalists and stockbrokers and visual artists and museums and fashion designers. So I just made a bad decision at the age of a child, and that lifestyle caused me to get 2 life sentences when I was 16 for an offense that I didn't even commit. Just being with, I'm not gonna say with the wrong people, but they were my friends. They still are my friends. But just living that lifestyle, I put myself in a position to be wrongly accused of something that I didn't do, in my uh, unwillingness to cooperate with the government to prosecute my friends. I had to receive 2 life sentences and spent 22 years incarcerated. So really just to get back to who I was, just being a nerd. So I'm cool with being a nerd now. So my agenda now is to like shift the culture on what it means to be a nerd and a geek, and to like make it cool to be smart, and you don't have to like seek your self-value through consumerism.
Mm. No, that's there's so much to unpack there. I wanna actually like bring this back to XVERSO and the platform and what we're doing today, launching these 10 NFTs, because if you think about it, the past 2.5 years has been the period of time in which most people become aware of NFTs as a viable means of collecting art and connecting with artists. I mean, what attracted you to NFTs as a creative person?
Hmm. For me, a lot of my creativity, as James Baldwin would say, is like, being socially constructed as Black. I don't get the opportunity to not be an activist, right? I don't get the luxury, So a lot of my product development, whether it's through NFTs or fashion, whatever, it's through the activism. So I say that to say is that what appealed to me about more, not just the NFTs, but just the whole decentralized finance and decentralized autonomous organization movement, is that I feel like someone who's socially constructed as being Black, that the systems that are formally in place do not work for Black people collectively, or people who socially constructed as Black. And even though I've been able to have individual commercial and social success, economic success, I'm not concerned with just myself as an individual. I'm really concerned with humanity as a collective, interconnected whole. And I really feel like this decentralized finance movement, and the ability to create decentralized autonomous organizations around ideals and create economies and currencies, and even NFTs, right, is an extremely important important opportunity in Western history, especially for people like myself who unfortunately are socially constructed amongst a group of people who've been perpetually just disadvantaged. So for me, the whole NFT thing is like, whether it's NFT or fashion or whatever, I've been into NFTs and crypto when I was in prison, like 8 years ago, before it became popular to the world. I've only been home from prison for 3 years, so I've just had the opportunity to access the technology to take all of this poetry and stuff that I was writing in prison when I just had ink pen and pencils and paper to be able to create paintings and NFTs. So I think a lot of time I have to inform people, like, when you're incarcerated, you don't have the internet, you don't have social media, you don't have smartphones and laptops and access to materials to play. So now with the NFTs, for me, it's just like finally getting the opportunity to be a part of this decentralized finance movement, which I believe can remedy a lot of the social inequalities that James Baldwin advocated for. I'm a James Baldwin disciple, and Basquiat.
Yeah, I could dig it. I dig it.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the NFTs that are being offered in today's auction. So for everyone that's joining us, obviously you can go on the XVERSO platform and you can see each of these unique NFTs. I know that each one has an audio file that accompanies it to describe the underpinnings of the work or the thought process around the work. But maybe we can talk about 2 or 3 of them now. I'm looking at them on my screen. I'm going to start with the image that is incorporates the mugshot of David Bowie. And maybe you can talk a little bit about that particular work.
For me, it's like I wanted to do like a mugshot series of works because like the carceral state is such an intricate part of my life experience. I spent 22 years in prison. I'm only 40. I'll be 42. So like half of my life has been incarcerated. And I wanted to take like these iconic figures who, even in their fame and their success, even they have intersected with this carceral state. And then David Bowie for me is like him having the creative freedom to create this Ziggy Stardust alter ego and album out of that. A lot of time I wear the space helmet and I talk about traveling time. And for me, I just think that a lot of people just don't know how to relax and to be children again and play with your imagination in a mature way. And it's therapeutic for me. So and I believe that David Bowie definitely was he understood love and he expressed it through his music. His advocacy for humanity was through his music, and him creating this Ziggy Stardust character. I just wanted to play with that idea in a thoughtful way, to interchange it with my personal story with the carceral state, and to say like, he's incarcerated for possessing, illegal love stardust. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like when we look at what's going on with the sister right now over in Russia.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it's just like, and a lot of times when you study the history of like the Jesus and the Buddhas and the Mahatma Gandhis and the Mother Teresas, just because of their crime is just loving humanity, and they can become enemies of the state just for having love for people. So this just like my playful way of dealing with serious topics of government control and authority and people not being encouraged to love themselves and others unconditionally.
And I noticed that in this series there are a couple of other images that do incorporate the mugshot. There's an image of Amy Winehouse. Why Amy Winehouse?
To me, it's like her voice resonates with me in a way like Jay-Z voice resonates with me and Stevie Wonder. It's just something about her voice and her even though she transitioned from us, what a lot of us would believe to be untimely, I still admire her audacity to be. And a lot of us never live our lives outside of the prisons of other people's opinions and evaluations about who we are and what our worth is to the world. And what I admire about her, like myself, a very small stature person with a big voice and a big heart to be, and not having any filters to pull back on sharing artistically who we really are, what we really feel like. And I think that's why she resonated with so many people in the world, and that's why she was sent to give voice to other people's frustrations and addictions and lack of self-love and resentment for self. So and I'm just a huge fan of her audacity to be more than her audacity to hope. And I believe that she served her purpose.
Mm, absolutely. And it's amazing how many fantastic artists, as you mentioned, transition, like leave us so early, and
Mm,
I guess that's a conversation for another time. But I do believe that there's a season for everything, and people
mm,
come into this world to do certain work, and it just needs to get done, and then maybe when that work is done, the work is done.
right.
Back to this series of NFTs. I'm also curious about the work that incorporates, if I'm not mistaken, Francis Bacon Pope painting.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I've heard of Francis Bacon before, but I think I really like set present with his work. We see, like, you could see some a million times. Like, I didn't even see I had, this mold in my ceiling. You've been in the house for 5 years. So I had the opportunity to see his Screaming Pope and his Head series. And to me, it was it was the ugliest, beautifulest thing that I've ever seen in my life. The most darkest, lightest thing that I ever saw in my life. And I think my eyes now are the algorithm in the way that I see has been upgraded. The software has been upgraded now that I'm a visual artist and I'm expressing myself through paintings and photography and fashion and sneakers. And so shoot. so so for me, when I saw that, I said, damn, I really just want to like repurpose. I want to repurpose what the yeah, I just wanted to repurpose that. So
Mm-hmm.
um so yeah, and I just like took that image right there and I like redesigned it on my tablet. And then I later came back and just like printed out the whole head series on canvas and just like just revisit them and just painted over top of them. So for me, it's like, as I say, that the work, the Screaming Pope, um, and I like when I put like the Fiat on there underneath the Pope because it's like, and it wasn't like any regards towards the position of the Pope. It to me, it's just like we have this culture in place in which people come in and praise to us the value of who we are, and they label me as super predator, right? And but underneath this authority that we recognize as a having full faith and credit in the money and the whole systems that's in place that don't work for the majority of people. Um, we allow other systems and other places and things to dictate to us our value. And to me, I just see it as like fear, and I not reject it wholeheartedly. And so it's like more than the iconography of the Screaming Pope. For me, it's just like the messaging of the super predator putting the fiat culture and the fiat currency and the fiat system that has no intrinsic value beneath my feet, and just standing on who I am. So they call me a super predator. So I've taken it and I made a brand out of it. And I changed the super predator from one who is criminalized, and I made the super predator into a hero that loves unconditionally and preys upon hate.
Wow, wow. Let's talk a little bit about some of the collaborations or work that you've done, as an artist and also as a fashion designer. Can you tell us a
Mhm.
little bit about your work in fashion and how that connects to what you do as a, as a, fashion is art to a great degree as well. But can you talk about fashion as it relates to your work as an artist as well?
For me, what I realized, like spending so much time in prison is so it's so monotonous in the decor, right? The decorum, the regalia, like the uniforms, and just it's just so dark and dreary. So when I started to express myself as a visual artist, I realized that I didn't even know colors anymore, right? And my wife had to like teach me about colors. You mix this color and this color to make this color. No, this color is this color. And it's like been a process, as I said, of seeing the world anew. So, and in 2014, a guy in Upstart Business Journal had did an article on me when I was incarcerated, and I talked to him about that when I get out, I wanted to start a fashion house. And once I had the opportunity to get out 5 years later, here I am now, 8 years later, and starting my fashion. And I think that I know for certain that I would have not been an effective fashion designer had I not went down the path of visual arts first, to recalibrate my eyes to see color, to the spiritual impact of color, and how to strategically place text on imagery. So now it's like being confident in like how I do things with visual artworks in reference to paintings and photography. The transition to wearable artwork is, I believe, is seamless. It's easy because if people feel comfortable with decorating their homes, right, which is in our culture is the most valuable asset to to an adult. It's like their most prized possession is their home. So if they feel comfortable with putting you on their walls for their family, their children, their guests to see, and keeping you there, exhibiting you in their most intimate space, the transition for them to wearing you on their feet and on their clothes, I mean, on their body, is easy. You just have to, do it in a dope way. So when I look at this thing that Virgil and Blow and others have made the high fashion world recognize as luxury streetwear. Streetwear was created by street guys who were the dope dealers. These were the drug dealers. These were the guys that I looked up to, who had the Fila sweatsuits, Adidas sweatsuits, the Nike Airs. So for me to design fashion, I'm just really paying homage to all of the guys who were in the street, who were murdered and given life sentences, who were my mentors, who never had the opportunity to get luxury attached to their humanity and what they did for hip hop culture and for luxury streetwear culture. So for me, being a disciple of them, I'm honoring all of those lost women and men who never got an opportunity to see the world and receive them as luxury, right? And what they created on the corners all over every inner city in America. So for me, it's like fashion for me is another tool for activism and advocacy, but also it's a way of me honoring my ancestors who passed away, who lost their lives on those corners, and who continue to be in prison for life sentences for things like selling marijuana that now people are selling on the same corners where they sold it at legally now in dispensaries, right? So I'm continuing on their legacy, and I'm going to compel the world to recognize that they are the luxury from which the luxury streetwear culture or genre ascended from.
There's so much more to you that is it's amazing, Halim. I mean, I know that you've probably had the opportunity to talk about being in prison, many different platforms. I've read some of the other interviews, and I'm hopeful that talking about that doesn't have any sort of negative effect on you psychologically. I'm hopeful that talking about it, is more of a process of healing, and less of a process of reliving. So, just, forgive me if I'm going down, roads that you're like, maybe you've gone down those roads many, many
Mm-hmm.
times. But I think that it is very inspirational to see how you've taken control of your life, a life that, the control was taken away from you, and you've taken control back of your life in a way that is just it's awesome, awe-inspiring. I saw that you started a publishing company,
Mm-hmm.
and you've written, was it 11 books?
Mm-hmm.
Most people can't get around to the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Writing their first one.
Yeah.
And again, one might say, well, if you have time on your hands, if you're incarcerated, maybe you have more time to write. But I don't even buy that, because it's not as
Mm-hmm.
though everyone who goes to prison writes books, right? That
Right.
still requires focus, purpose, and a plan. So
Mm-hmm.
talk a little, if you could talk a little bit about that. I mean, you have a fashion house, you're an artist. I mean, it's like this 360-degree creative person, but where does literature and poetry come into the picture?
For me, it's like I had the opportunity to read Sheryl Sandberg. She wrote a book called Lean In, and
Mm.
I had the opportunity to read that
I did
when I
not
was in.
expect you to talk about that book.
Yeah. So, when I read that book, I was like, wow, this is what I'm already doing. Like, society is telling me I'm a super predator, I'm a menace to society, I'm a lifer, and I'm nothing. You're right. I'm the wretch of the earth, as Frantz Fanon would say. But I don't feel that way about myself. I feel like I'm dope. Right. I feel like I'm a golden. I feel like a king. I feel like a chairman and a chief executive officer. Um, so what I'm gonna do is like I have these ideas. I'm gonna put them together poetically. I'm gonna start this poetry or this publishing company. I'm not gonna wait for nobody to come and sign me. Like I'm just gonna push what I feel. And then, then I was reading all these self-help books like As a Man Thinketh and Think and Grow Rich, The Secret, all this stuff was impacting my life positively. I say, well, let me write it from the street guy perspective, where the people from the streets or the people that's in prison, where they can understand, like put it in our language. So I started writing self-help books. I started writing cognitive therapy books because I saw what cognitive therapy was helping me to uh, visit. I'm not even gonna say revisit. It was helping me to experience that I had criminal and rational thinking errors, and this made me more of a critical and thinker, which made me a more doper poet. Because instead of just writing poetry, now I'm like really giving thought into what I'm saying, And I was like, if cognitive therapy did this for me, then let me write a cognitive therapy book, for people to be able to examine their criminal and rational thinking errors. So I really, just like now, I design what I wear. I wrote books that I like and that I read in literature. Um, it's a brother from Baltimore. He wrote a book called On the Stoop, and he just talked about like how literature civilized him. And for me, it's like literature has civilized me because I grew up in D.C. when it was Chocolate City. Most of us were socially constructed as black and poor, and I just had that black poor perspective. And not to say that anything was wrong with it, it's just that I didn't have a frame of reference that gave me connections and understanding of Asian culture or African culture or European culture, So it was like, as I started to read these books, and I remember I read this novel and it was talking about a flat in London, and I looked up flat and I said, wow, this is an apartment. Like, I didn't know that. And it was just like an awareness of how limited I was in my experience going to prison so young. So for me, everything that I do with like the fashion, with the paintings, so much of it is intellectually and spiritually driven. And so mostly all of my foundation as far as intellectual and spiritual stuff comes from books. And so like what Sheryl Sandberg said, instead of me feeling ashamed about selling drugs when I was 12 and feeling ashamed of being a lifer or accepting that I'm a menace to society or super predator, I'm like, man, I feel like I'm still dope. You know what I'm saying? I feel like I have something to offer to humanity. So I'm going to lean in to what other people are ashamed of, and through me leaning into what others consider would make them vulnerable, which is genuine transparency. A lot of people started to resonate with me because a lot of people want that type of courage to be
Right.
themselves authentically, and that's how they started rocking with me. It's like, damn, like, you know, one of my rap songs, I was like, I made $1 million from painting and I don't know how to paint, you know, and it's like, hold up, like, you don't know how to paint, like, you know what I'm saying? So it's just that freedom to be that resonates with people. And yeah, shout out to Cheryl though. I read her book and it was dope, man. And that's all. I'm just leaning into me, you know.
Truly, true, true freedom. We talked a lot about the past. Let's talk about the future. What's in the works? I mean, can you tell us a little bit about the things you're planning on the artistic side, on the fashion
Mhm.
side? I'm sure just judging from everything you said, I know you got a lot of things in the works.
Yeah, definitely. I have 100 short stories that I wrote that I never published. They just sitting in my basement. I wrote them when I was in prison. I definitely look forward to getting into the film, whether it's like movies or series. I wrote plays. People don't know about. I'm a playwright. With the art, my gallery, DTR Modern Galleries that represent me on the East Coast, they're coming out with like an art table book through Scala Publishing out of Britain. So that's coming out this fall. And also we doing a solo exhibit at Art Miami in December. And then also my first fashion show will be during New York City Fashion Week, September 11th. So I'm doing that with the lab for New York Fashion Week, and I'm excited about that. It's a collective show. It's not my own private show, but you know, and in the process of signing the Outshine Talent, signing the contract like within the next 24 hours. So this will be the first time that I had a team. You know, like, and I never thought that I would sign with management, but I just vibe with the lady Barbara Jones so much, and and that was a big part of it. And it was like just seeing how she moved as a family and they have a team, and really just like tired of doing everything myself. You know what I'm saying? Like I built this whole empire of literature and fashion and, you know, all of this stuff on my own. It's like, you know, I really want to scale to another level because I really want to advance in my. I'm doing all of this stuff for philanthropy. Like if somebody would just be like, just give me $50 billion, then I'd probably stop doing what I'm doing and I could focus on building the systems and the institutions to make humanity more loving. But until then, I have to do all these things, you know, creatively that I enjoy doing to get the social capital, the genuine relationships with myself and others, and the economic capital to really revolutionize what it means to be a philanthropist and really build institutions and systems that's founded on genuine equity and holistic love and wellness, and really start to like really see the metrics or the impact in the work that I'm seeking to contribute to people with my similar lived experience or even with not similar lived experience. So and then we also got the HBO documentary that we filming right now with Blowback Productions. Lastly, that should be released hopefully early next year. So we almost done filming that. So that's just some of the things I'm doing, and I got some other stuff coming, but I got like an NDA that I signed for that. But it's huge. It's like a huge thing, but I can't publicly announce it right now. That'll be coming out early next year too, with a major uh entertainment company celebrating their anniversary. So
Man, you truly are a time traveler. The things you've done in the time that the past couple of years is just like incredible, man. Absolutely incredible.
yeah.
We're down to the final like few minutes of our conversation today.
Hmm.
And I remind everyone that is joining us that they can bid on the 10 NFTs for another 23 hours after our conversation concludes today. So I encourage everyone to do so. Halim, you mentioned something earlier that I wanted to kind of two things I want to come back to before we end today's discussion. One of them
Mhm.
has to do with like the freedom you have as an artist to make the work you want to make, right?
Mhm.
And what's funny to me about that is that for people who don't know anything about the art world, they probably think that every artist feels that they have that freedom. When in reality, there's so many artists that feel completely like just, you know, confined by
Mhm.
their academic training, confined by the commercial
Mhm.
aspirations they have as an artist. So I'm sure, as you mentioned, artists come to you and they say, I wish I had that kind of freedom. Have you made this work? So if there were artists that were joining us today,
Mhm.
what kind of, what would you share with them about your journey, about, getting out, maybe getting out of their own way for their career?
Mhm. Definitely. For me, it's like having had the opportunity to develop my own personal philosophy and constitution. Um, so money isn't more important to me than integrity and happiness and joy. Um, so I just think that a lot of artists need to figure that out. What's most important to you, and if money is the most important thing to you, then you're going to have to compartmentalize your relationship with your creativity, because you're going to probably be beholden to some gallery, and you're going to have to create a body of work for them that's the most, that they believe has the most commercial viability, and then also be able to create work that you genuinely enjoy for yourself. And maybe that stuff is just not for sale, it's just your therapy, so that you don't lose yourself completely in the commerciality of your work. Because I believe that when you don't give yourself space to be authentically, and you just confined to the prison of commercial success, your creative self will start to turn against you, and it'll even impact the stuff that you're trying to do commercially. So one artist that I admire a lot, is two artists. Is Robert Nava, and the other guy name is damn Danny Fox. I
Hmm.
think that they they are both formally trained, but they create works that fight against their formal training, and they've still been able to be commercially successful, and being their authentic self. But I realize, like, being who you authentically want to be in a world that convinces you to be everybody else, with all of that social media peer influence. Like, I grew up with like real life people peer influence, but multiply that with the whole globe and these people who got fake accounts criticizing me and me caring about what they say. I could just imagine how people are just under so much anxiety. So for me, it's like, and that's why when I do these like NFTs, I always like to accompany the audio with it, because very rarely do you hear an artist like a Rasheed Johnson or Mark Bradford, artists that I look up to, Cicely Brown, who give you a genuine audio, a voice to explaining why they created what they created. And I just like want the artists to hear and the collectors to hear why I made what I made. But so they could just see that I'm just sharing a part of me. And there's no mystery behind the work. It's like this is what it is. I want you to understand it. I don't want to be that abstract.
Right, right.
Yeah.
One final question before we
Hmm.
go, and it's a little fun one. Talk to me a little bit about this alter ego and this time travel
Yeah.
philosophy.
Yeah, for me, as I was mentioning to somebody, like, I grew up on the Goonies and stuff, man, and like, Thundercats and Voltron, and it's like, people think that being an adult is like losing that imaginary fun part of yourself. Like, you gotta be this serious, mature. Like, no, you can still pay your bills, have your 401k, invest in your crypto and your real estate, and do all of these adult things, and you can still like enjoy anime and cartoons, and you can still like enjoy if you want to dress up for Halloween. Whatever that you into that people may consider goofy or playful, it doesn't take away from your maturity when know how to compartmentalize your relationship with yourself and the worldly demand. So for me, I just like, I like all the dope people like Charlie Parker and Billie Holiday and Tupac, and I want to kick it with George Washington. I want to have a conversation with him. Like, okay, the Constitution and all that was dope, but slavery is whack. You know what I'm saying? I want to talk to you about that to get an understanding from the future with the world at today, to give him that perspective and bring him up to the future. And me, George Washington, James Baldwin, Andy Warhol, Basquiat, Joe Louis, Muhammad Ali. It's just so many dope people that we've been blessed to have, like Nikola Tesla and Elon Musk, if we can get them together and have a conversation. So I just like my playful way of, like, when Napoleon Hill mentioned in Think and Grow Rich, he mentioned like forming these mastermind groups. So I have that imagination that people tend to lose when they become adults, still have minds. And I like to, indulge in it, man, and put my space helmet on and go meet Billie Holiday and see Nina Simone perform Strange Fruit live, and be there with the zoot suits on and stuff like that. So it's just inspiring to me. And it's a way of like honoring our ancestors.
Well, Halim, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. And that's the perfect word. You said inspiring for you. Well, you've been inspiring for me,
Yeah, man,
and I
it's
mean
an
that.
honor
I
to
mean
meet
that
you.
out of my heart, For everyone that's joining us, just, truth be told, this is the first time we've actually had a conversation at length.
Mm-hmm.
So this has been a pleasure for me, because all of my questions were questions that I really wanted to ask you. None of this was staged or scripted. This was
Right.
me, as someone who loves art, who loves artists, really wanting to kind of get to know you as a person, as a human being. And I really, I'm so happy that we have this connection through XVERSO. And I'm excited about these NFTs. And I want to remind everyone one more time before we end today's conversation that you have another 23 hours to bid on these NFTs. And follow him on social media. Obviously, you guys know about XVERSO, or you wouldn't be here joining us today. But also make sure you're following XVERSO on social media. We have a lot of great things coming up in the near future. But Halim, I can't wait to meet you in person. That time is coming.
Yeah.
So we're gonna sign off and remind everyone to keep bidding, and let's make this a success.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, man. Thank you.
Right.